What if I told you that hitting $100,000 in savings doesn't just change your bank account balance, but actually triggers something financial experts call the 100,000 rule? What if I told you that this seemingly random number creates a psychological and mathematical shift so profound that wealthy people consider it the real starting line for building serious money? Most people think 100 grand is just another milestone on the way to becoming a millionaire, but they're completely missing the point. This number represents the moment when money stops working against you and starts working for you in ways that will genuinely shock you. My name is Nick, and I've spent an embarrassing amount of time studying why some people build wealth while others collect participation trophies in the financial Olympics. If you want to understand what really happens when you cross the most important savings threshold that nobody talks about, make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash the like button if this video makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about money. Here's what blew my mind when I first discovered the 100,000 rule. Everyone focuses on becoming a millionaire, but the real magic happens at $100,000. It's like everyone's obsessing over the final level of a video game while completely ignoring the boss fight that actually unlocks the secret powers. The shift from having 50,000 to 100,000 isn't just doubling your savings. It's like discovering that your money has been hiding superpowers this whole time. The first thing that changes when you hit 100,000 is something that sounds boring but is actually revolutionary. Your money starts making serious money. I know that sounds obvious, but stick with me because the math is about to get wild. When you had $10,000 earning 8% annually, that was $800 a year. Nice, but that's not exactly life-changing money. It's like your money is working a part-time job at minimum wage. But when $100,000 earns that same 8%, you're looking at $8,000 a year in returns. That's not investment income anymore. That's a legitimate salary that your money is earning while you sleep. Your cash is suddenly working harder than most people do at their actual jobs. And here's the kicker, that 8,000 grows every year if you don't touch it, which means your money salary keeps getting raises while you're binge watching Netflix. This is where compound interest stops being this mythical concept that financial advisors ramble about and becomes a real force you can actually feel. Before 100,000, compound interest was like that friend who promises to help you move but never shows up. Technically there, but not really making a difference. After 100,000, compound interest becomes your best employee, showing up every day and generating income without asking for vacation time or complaining about the coffee in the break room. But here's something that nobody warned me about when I first started studying wealth psychology. Hitting $100,000 can actually mess with your head in ways that are both awesome and terrifying. Your brain, which has been trained to think about money in terms of scarcity and survival, suddenly has to process the concept of abundance. It's like your financial operating system gets a major software update, and sometimes there are bugs in the new version. The first psychological shift is what I call investment fearlessness. Before 100,000, every investment decision felt like Russian roulette because you couldn't afford to lose. Should I put $1,000 in the stock market? What if it crashes and I need that money for rent? But when you have 100,000 sitting in your accounts, losing $1,000 on a bad investment becomes annoying rather than catastrophic. It's the difference between losing your only pair of shoes and losing one pair from a closet full of options. This fearlessness unlocks investment strategies that were impossible before. You can actually buy stocks when they're crashing, which is when the real money gets made. You can hold through market volatility without panic selling at the bottom. You can take calculated risks on growth investments that could multiply your money over time. Essentially, you get access to the same psychological tools that rich people use, which is why they keep getting richer. Here's where it gets really interesting from a behavioral economics perspective. The 100,000 milestone triggers what researchers call wealth identity formation. Before this point, you might have money, but you don't think of yourself as wealthy. You're still operating from a scarcity mindset. making decisions based on fear of losing what you have. But crossing six figures creates this weird psychological shift where you start thinking like someone who has money rather than someone who's temporarily not broke. This identity shift shows up in surprising ways. You stop checking your bank balance obsessively because you already know there's money there. You make purchases based on value rather than price. You start thinking in terms of opportunity costs rather than just affordability. That expensive course you were debating suddenly becomes an obvious investment in yourself because you understand that increasing your earning power by even 10% would pay for it within months. The career psychology completely transforms at this level too. When you have 100,000 in the bank, your relationship with your job fundamentally changes. You're no longer working to survive, you're working to thrive. This subtle shift in motivation creates what I like to call professional confidence that's impossible to fake. You negotiate harder because you're not desperate. You take on challenging projects because you can afford to fail. You speak up in meetings because you're not terrified of getting fired. This professional confidence creates a weird feedback loop where success breeds more success. When you're not operating from a place of financial desperation, you make better career decisions. You're more likely to switch jobs for better opportunities. You're more willing to invest in networking and professional development. You start thinking strategically about your career rather than just trying to keep your head above water. But let's talk about something that absolutely nobody prepares you for when you're grinding towards six figures. Like, the social dynamics get incredibly weird once you cross this threshold. Suddenly, you're the friend with money, which comes with expectations and complications that you never saw coming. People start assuming you should pay for group dinners or that you can afford to lend money without it being a big deal. Family members might start treating you like their personal financial advisor, expecting free help with their money problems. The dating dynamics become particularly strange. Having substantial savings makes you more attractive to some people, but for all the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, you start caring more about potential partners' financial habits because you finally understand how important money compatibility is for long-term relationships. That person who can't manage their credit card debt suddenly becomes a red flag rather than just a quirky personality trait. Here's something fascinating that happens around 100,000 that most people don't expect. You develop what I call strategic spending patterns. Instead of just buying things because you want them or avoiding purchases because they're expensive, you start making decisions based on return on investment. That expensive gym membership becomes a health investment. That pricey course becomes an income investment. That high quality mattress becomes a sleep quality investment. This doesn't mean you become some calculating robot who only buys things that generate measurable returns. It means you become intentional about your money in ways that compound over time. You might spend more on things that matter to you while cutting ruthlessly on things that don't. You develop expensive taste in areas that align with your values and cheap taste in everything else. The investment psychology at this level becomes genuinely exciting rather than terrifying. Before 100,000, investing felt like gambling because every dollar mattered for your immediate survival. But with a solid foundation, market volatility becomes opportunity rather than threat. You can actually buy more when prices drop instead of panicking and selling at the worst possible moment. You start understanding why Warren Buffett gets excited during market crashes while everyone else is freaking out. Yeah, this psychological shift around market volatility is huge because it unlocks the investment strategies that actually build wealth. The rich don't get richer by playing it safe with their money. They get richer by being able to take calculated risks when everyone else is too scared to move. Having 100,000 gives you the psychological capacity to think like a wealthy person rather than just someone who temporarily has some money. But here's where things get really wild, and this is something that caught me completely off guard when I first learned about it. The 100,000 milestone changes your relationship with time itself. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're trapped in what psychologists call temporal myopia. You can only see immediate needs because the future feels too uncertain and scary to plan for. But substantial savings create what researchers call temporal flexibility. Suddenly, you can make decisions based on long-term outcomes rather than immediate pressures. This time, perspective shift affects literally everything. You start thinking in years and decades rather than weeks and months. That boring but stable job becomes a strategic stepping stone rather than a prison sentence. That expensive certification program becomes an obvious investment in your future earning power. You can afford to be patient with investments that take years to pay off because you're not constantly putting out financial fires. The relationship with risk transforms in ways that might surprise you. You'd think having more money would make you more risk averse, but often the opposite happens. When you have a solid financial foundation, you can afford to take calculated risks that could dramatically improve your situation. The person with $100,000 in savings is more likely to start a business, invest in themselves, or make a strategic career change than someone living paycheck to paycheck. This creates what I call the 100,000 paradox. You'd expect that having more to lose would make you more cautious, but the security actually makes you bolder in smart ways. When you're broke, every financial decision feels like a potential catastrophe. Should I spend $50 on that book? What if I need that $50 for groceries next week? But when you have $100,000 in the bank, that same $50 decision becomes trivial. You stop sweating the small stuff because you finally have perspective on what actually matters. The compound interest psychology becomes genuinely addictive at this level. When you're earning $8,000 a year just from investment returns, you start to understand viscerally how rich people get richer. It's not magic or luck or secret knowledge. It's just math combined with time and discipline. But seeing it happen in your own account creates a psychological shift that's impossible to describe unless you've experienced it. Your money starts feeling alive, like it's working for you even when you're sleeping. This is where the wealth building mindset really kicks in. Instead of thinking about spending money, you start thinking about deploying capital. That sounds pretentious, but there's actually a psychological difference. When you spend money, it's gone forever. When you deploy capital, you're expecting it to come back with friends. This mindset shift is what separates people who stay middle class forever from people who actually build wealth over time. The career conversations you have with yourself completely transform at this milestone. That job you hate but stay at because you need the paycheck suddenly becomes optional. Not because you can retire on $100,000, but because you have enough runway to make a strategic career move. You can take a temporary pay cut to get into a better company. You can go back to school. You can start that side business you've been dreaming about. This freedom creates what psychologists call approach motivation instead of avoidance motivation. Instead of working to avoid being broke, you start working toward building something meaningful. It's the difference between running away from a bear and running toward a finish line. Both involve running, but the psychological experience is completely different, and the results reflect that difference. Here's something that really struck me about the 100,000 psychology that nobody talks about. You develop what I call financial telepathy. Not the supernatural kind, but the ability to instantly recognize other people who understand money. It's like having a secret handshake that happens entirely through body language and casual comments. You can spot someone with substantial savings from across a restaurant just by how they order. They're not the ones agonizing over appetizer prices or calculating tips on their phone. They order what they actually want and move on with their lives. This financial telepathy creates these weird moments where you'll be talking to someone and realize they're operating from the same psychological space you are. Maybe they mention casually maxing out their retirement contributions or talk about rebalancing their portfolio like it's no big deal. Suddenly you're having conversations that would have sounded like gibberish to your former broke self. It's like discovering there's been this whole parallel society of financially responsible adults that you finally have clearance to access. But here's where the 100,000 milestone gets genuinely strange, and I mean this in the best possible way. Your relationship with material possessions completely inverts. Before this point, you probably defined yourself partially by what you couldn't afford. That expensive watch you wanted became part of your identity as someone who couldn't have nice things. But once you cross six figures, something bizarre happens. You could afford that watch, which somehow makes you not want it anymore. It's like the adult version of realizing you're allowed to eat candy for breakfast, which immediately makes candy for breakfast seem less appealing. When you can afford most things, you start caring more about why you want them than whether you can pay for them. That luxury car payment becomes a question of whether you want to trade $40,000 for the experience of driving something fancier, not whether you can technically make the monthly payments. This psychological shift around material desires is liberating in ways that sound almost spiritual. You stop being a slave to consumer marketing because your identity isn't tied up in what you own. You might drive a 10-year-old car while having 100,000 in investments, and somehow that feels more impressive than financing a brand new truck. It's like you've been playing a video game on hard mode your entire life, and suddenly someone shows you the cheat codes. The time perspective continues to evolve in ways that are honestly a little unsettling. With six figures sitting in your accounts, you start thinking about money in terms of decades instead of months. That $1,000 course isn't expensive anymore. It's an investment that could pay dividends for 30 years. That vacation you've been postponing isn't a luxury. It's a memory you're buying while you're still young enough to enjoy it fully. You start making decisions based on your 80-year-old self's priorities, which is both wise and occasionally depressing. Here's something that caught me completely off guard about crossing the 100,000 threshold. You become invisible to predatory financial services in the best possible way. Those payday loan places, rent-to-own furniture stores, and check cashing services literally cannot see you anymore. It's like you've developed financial camouflage that makes you undetectable to businesses that profit from desperation. Meanwhile, suddenly you're getting phone calls from wealth management firms wanting to discuss investment strategies. The shift in how financial institutions treat you is almost comical if it weren't so revealing about how the system actually works, The same bank that used to charge you overdraft fees for being $3 short now wants to offer you premium services and credit cards with ridiculous limits. It's like the financial world has different physics depending on your bank account balance, and crossing six figures gives you access to the better physics. But let's talk about something that genuinely keeps me up at night thinking about it. The 100,000 milestone reveals just how much of the economy depends on people not having money. Think about it. If everyone had substantial savings, who would pay credit card interest? Who would get payday loans? Who would finance furniture at 29% interest? The entire consumer debt industry exists because most people live paycheck to paycheck. And once you escape that system, you realize how predatory it actually was. This realization can be genuinely disturbing because it means your financial progress is built on understanding a game that most people don't even know they're playing. You're not winning because you're smarter. You're winning because you figured out the rules while everyone else is still trying to survive the game. It's like discovering that the maze you've been trapped in has an exit that was always there, but nobody told you where to look. The career psychology at six figures becomes absolutely fascinating from a power dynamics perspective. You're no longer an employee who happens to have a job. You're a professional who chooses to work somewhere. That distinction might sound subtle, but it changes literally everything about how you show up at work. You speak differently in meetings because you're not terrified of getting fired. You negotiate differently because you have options. You take on projects differently because you can afford to bet on yourself. This professional confidence creates opportunities that were literally impossible before. Employers can sense when someone has financial security and they respond to it. You become the person they offer promotions to because you seem stable and confident. You become the one they send to important meetings because you carry yourself like someone who belongs there. It's a weird psychological feedback loop where having money makes you act like someone who deserves more money, which then leads to actually getting more money. Here's where the investment psychology gets really addictive, and I mean that in the most literal sense. When your 100,000 starts generating $8,000 to $10,000 annually in passive income, your brain starts producing dopamine every time you check your investment accounts. It's like having a slot machine that pays out consistently instead of randomly. You start looking forward to market dips because they represent buying opportunities rather than disasters. So there you have it. $100,000 isn't just a savings milestone. It's your entrance ticket to an entirely different financial reality. The psychological transformation that happens at six figures changes everything from how you sleep at night to how you negotiate your salary. Your money stops being something you worry about and becomes something that works for you around the clock. If you're still grinding toward that 100,000 mark, remember that every dollar you save is buying you more than just financial security. It's buying you options, confidence, and the ability to think like someone who actually has money instead of someone who's just temporarily not broke. And trust me, that difference will change your life in ways you can't even imagine yet. The journey to $100,000 isn't just about hitting an arbitrary number. It's about fundamentally rewiring your relationship with money, risk, and opportunity. You've seen how this milestone creates a psychological transformation that turns compound interest from a boring concept into your most reliable employee. You've discovered how financial security breeds the kind of confidence that actually creates more financial opportunities, and you've learned why wealthy people consider six figures the real starting line for building serious wealth. But here's what I want you to remember as you're grinding toward that 100,000 mark. Every single dollar you save is doing more than just increasing your bank balance. It's buying you options, confidence, and most importantly, time to think strategically instead of just surviving financially. The person you become on the journey to six figures is just as valuable as the destination itself. If this video opened your eyes to why the 100,000 rule changes everything, make sure you're subscribed because I'm constantly breaking down the financial psychology that separates people who build wealth from people who just dream about it. Drop a comment and let me know where you are on your journey to six figures if you found this valuable. Smash that like button to help other people discover why $100,000 is the most important milestone nobody talks about. Your future wealthy self will thank you for taking action today.